All right, it's cover price week. It's Wednesday, and it is time to go back 3 years. All right, guys, we are going to get into this cover price video. We're going back 3 years. Before we do, I want to remind everyone I'm all over eBay and eBay Live, guys. Check me out. If you have an eBay account, give me a follow. Check out my store, VERYGARY_comics. I do have people asking me a lot, where can you buy books? Where can they buy books for me if they're not on the East Coast going to the conventions that I go to and they don't want to use Whatnot? Check out my eBay store. Check out eBay Live. Or check me out on Whatnot. So let's get into this. Let's start out. We're going right into it. We're going back 3 years on this cover price list. Let's start out with number 10. This is Kanto number 1. 3 years ago, Kanto was crazy hot, commanding more than $250 for a near mint raw copy and reaching highs of $1,200 for 9/8 around this time in 2021. Will Smith and Jada Pinkett's production company Westbrook Studios announced it had optioned the comic with plans to turn it into an animated feature. 3 years later, Kanto has fallen back to earth. 9.8 copies can be purchased close to $300, and fans and collectors can now buy near mint raws for about $60. Since 2021, The Clockwork Knight has had several new series released via IDW, but any news surrounding an adaptation has been scarce. This one is a bust. The Kanto fan base is rabid. This would make a fantastic animated series. Let's hope it happens. Let's get to number 9. This is Marvel's Voices number 1. In 2021, the X-Men were just kicking off a new era, living in Krakoa, battling with Orcus, and learning how to be immortal. Released in March, the Children of the Atom series served as the long-promised culmination of Mr. Sinister's plans to create a Chimera in House of X. Chimera. In addition to introducing a new team of mutants, this book also marked the debut of Goddess Spider, the spider that bit Peter Parker and Sydney Moon. At the time, the book was selling for just under $60 for raw near mint copies. Since it was a new release, there are no recorded graded sales. 3 years later, Marvel's Voices has cooled down considerably. Today, collectors can now find near mint raw copies for $15, and 9/8 are plentiful as well. Interesting, the last copy to sell was in 2021 and it sold for $150. This one is technically a bust, but it's way too early to tell what's in store for the X-Men down the road. You may want to hold on to this one, and prices may still go down a little bit if you're interested. Let's get to number 9. 8. Let's get to number 8. This is West Coast Avengers number 45. White Vision was a $10 to $15 book for decades until WandaVision changed everything. 3 years ago, West Coast Avengers number 45 was still hot from the WandaVision hype, fetching $100 for near mint raw copies and $560 for graded 9/8 copies. 3 years later, and this has dipped into a reasonable price range for a massively printed Bronze Age key. Today, raw near mint copies of this book can be bought for just over $30, while 9/8 copies have experienced a steep drop, falling under $200, which I think is probably the right value. This one is a bust in terms of value dip for now. That said, White Vision will likely be returning to the MCU, possibly in the Wonder Man show that is currently in development. It's unlikely this issue will hit the value highs of 2021, but it could jump somewhat if it does. I think it could get a little bit of a pop. $200 for 9.8 from 1989 of a book that is a minor key. It's a key. I mean, you can't say it's not. It's the first appearance of White Vision. It's an homage to the first appearance of Vision on the cover. Like, cool book. So I feel like 200, maybe 100, I don't even want to say 150, but we'll say 150 to 200 is probably the right range for this book. So it's probably where it wants to be, where it needs to be. Could it get a little pop? Maybe we see 250, maybe. Very little pop. If you're interested in this book, sit, wait it out. But I would keep eyes on it as Wonder Man kind of gets closer. Let's get to number 7. This is Ultimate Fallout number 4. Hey, I know this book. Every time I write about Ultimate Fallout number 4 for a reflective spotlight, I feel like Marty McFly is clutching a copy of the Gray Sports Almanac. 3 years ago, this book was absolutely on fire, hitting a height of $3,200 for a 9.8. In March of 2021, near mint raw copies of the first appearance of Miles Morales were selling for around $700. Thanks to speculation about the character appearing in the MCU after the reveal of the multiverse, this book peaked in March of 2021. Since then, this book has boomed and evened out, but still remains hot. 3 years later, near mint raw copies of this book are still moving for more than $500. Graded 9/8, though, have taken a hit, falling to $1,200 in 2024. This one is a bust, but it's unsurprising. To quote Nietzsche, you make it up on the top of the mountain, and what's left for me, this, okay. Let's This is Ultimate Fallout 4. This is the first Miles Morales. I don't know how much further this book will drop. I'll be honest with you. It kind of steadily has come back down to earth. So there's a lot of graded 9.8 copies out there. Just keep that in mind. Let's go to number 6. This is Spidey Super Stories number 1. It's from 1974 here. 3 years ago, Miles Morales was so hot that it led to collectors looking at this book, Spidey Super Stories number 1, because it featured the appearances of the first black Spider-Man in this issue, Dwayne, a member of the short circus from the Electric Company dreams that Spider-Man enlists him to take over as Spidey while he's out of town. Naturally, it also led collectors to Amazing Spider-Man 87, in which Hobie Brown, who is also Spider-Punk in Alternate Spider-Verse, first wears the spider suit. 3 years ago, this book sold 46 copies, had a 7-day trend of 165%, and had a high sale of $182 and a 9.4. At the time, near mint raw copies of this book were fetching $150. Now, 3 years later, this book has fallen drastically in terms of raw copies, which can now be bought for around 46. I wish I should keep these around, huh? Graded copies in this case, another 9.4, has fared slightly better, only dipping to 128. This is a fun book, but buying it on spec might be a misfire. This one is a bust. Just buy the book because you want it. Do not spec on this book. Let's go to number 5. Slam number 1. In March of 2021, Warner Media's Rooster Teeth Studios picked up Slam by Pam Ribon and Veronica Fish for development as an adult animated half-hour series. Slam, which is set in the fast-paced, all-female world of banked track roller derby, was selling just over $40 3 years ago for a near mint raw copy. At the time, graded 9.8 copies were selling for around $150. 3 years later, and this one is a bust. Not only can you find raw copies for $2, 9.8s are selling for $10. Recently, according to the all-knowing Covrprice team, an auction for a 9.8 slab ended at $4. Whether or not Slam makes it to its way to TV, it's hard to see this climb to 2021 prices. Guys, if Slam 9.8s are selling for like $4 to $10, you have any halfway decent faith. I mean, it's kind of worth a little risk, but don't do what I say, guys. Do your own research. Do your own, don't just take what I say with a grain of salt. Do your own research, like I say in most of these videos. Let's get to number 4. This is Eniac number 1 from Bad Idea. We try to be positive here at Covrprice, so let me say this. Eniac is a comic book that exists. There we go. In 2021, the first release from Bad Idea has collectors chasing down scarce, use that term loosely, copies, hoping it would be optioned or established as a collectible. This book sold 122 over 7 days at that time, commanding $225 for a raw copy, and a high sale of $700 for a 9.8. 3 years later, the hype around Eniac and Bad Idea in general has died down, leaving this book as a bust. Currently, near mint raw copies sell for $6. Graded 9.8 copies sell for just over $20. Do not fall for something like this. Do not fall for this kind of a book. Those numbers were ridiculous. Let's get to number 2. This is Lenore number 1. Neil Gaiman has been attached to this comic since 2011, when at San Diego Comic-Con, Lenore creator Roman Dirge announced that Gaiman would act as an executive producer with Sony Family Entertainment, producing the feature film. After over a decade, this project is still being developed with Canadian multinational E1 and is now working with Gaiman. In 2021, this book saw a spike from the news, causing near mint raw copies to top out at $100. 9.8s jumped to $200. 3 years later, this book is looking like a draw. This project is still in limbo, so near mint raw copies of this book have steadied at $25. On the other hand, graded 9.8 copies have only gone up, topping over $500 in 2024. I've got nothing for you on this one, guys. If you have patience, sit. If you're nervous, I don't know what to tell you. Before we get into number 1, I want to remind everybody, Covrprice.com has a discount code down below in the description. Sign up, use it. The discount code gives you exactly that, a discount for the platform, for the tool. It's absolutely tremendous. Let's get to number 1. This is Mystery Girl number 1. In 2021, Tiffany Haddish, Yeah, was set to produce and star in an adaptation of Mystery Girl for Dark Horse Entertainment and Netflix. At the time, Mystery Girl was a new book and its value jumped to $44 on the secondary market. There were no graded copies available at the time. Now, 3 years later, this book has dropped into obscurity. Collectors and fans alike can find near mint raw copies for $4, and buyers simply don't want 9.8 copies. This one is a bust. Now, guys, you gotta keep in mind, you're going all the way back to the height 3 years ago of comic book collecting. So you're seeing completely irrelevant books on this list that have dropped 90% of their value. It's crazy. It's absolutely crazy. Was that number one? That was number two. That wasn't number one. That was number two. This is number one. Let's look at this one. This is Nottingham number one. Nottingham launched in 2020 run, arrived hot out of the gate, selling at $50 for near mint raw copies and eventually reaching $475 for graded 9.8 copies during the following May. Featuring a new twist on Robin Hood, Nottingham topped the weekly chart with 78 copies sold 3 years later, and this book remains fairly warm. Near mint raw copies have dipped a bit to 30. 9.8 copies, though, have fell hard. That's a trend, guys. Currently, slabbed copies can be snatched up for under $80. This one's a bust with strong story and a loyal following. This could heat up again if it's ever optioned. Now it's the end of our list, but we've seen the trends where the graded 9.8 copies have fallen hard. The near mint raw copies have either increased or fallen slightly. We were overvaluing the 9.8s on a lot of these modern variants and modern books, but everyone was. That was the market. It was absolutely on fire. With that, come back tomorrow, Thursday. We're going back 4 years now for Thursday. This is Cover Price Week. Every day we get a video. Thank you guys so much for watching, and as always, keep it comics.